brothers watching you over there in the council chamber. Is the meeting started to be recorded, Pamela?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, members, for attending this afternoon, and the officers. If we go to the agenda, item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you, Pamela. Item 2 on the agenda is declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No? I take silence as no. Item 3 then, we've got minutes of the last meeting, 26th of May 2022, pages 3 to 16. For correctness, someone prepared to move, please?
Sorry, Chair. Can I raise an issue in relation to the minutes, please?
Yeah.
I think...
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay, Norma.
One of the points that I have raised is the importance for minutes to note actions. And I note at the end of our papers, there is paper actions, but nothing's on it. I mean, there are 2 actions that are noted in those minutes, and I think it's really important that they're noted in actions so that we can keep track of them, that someone actually does what's required. I think it's good practice to have it in the minutes, plus an action log that you can see what is happening.
Yes, thank you for that, Norma. I think Pamela is going to pick it up as part of the agenda moving forward. Is that right, Pamela? We're going to have an action log for the next meeting moving forward?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on the minutes? Subject then to Norma's comment about the action log. Is someone prepared to move them as a correct record?
Yes, Chair.
Andrew.
Sorry, Chair, just butting in, before you accept the minutes, the actions from the previous minutes are noted on point 17 of the current minutes. And that'll start the log going from here on in. So members may have not picked that up, but they're actually included in the minutes. As soon as there are any additional actions, obviously Pam will take a note of those if we've missed any. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you for clarification, Andrew. Norma, is that okay?
I don't know whether I noted them. I know that I raised 2 issues, one in relation to the Charter and one in relation to the Fairness Commission, where officers said they would give it consideration.
Okay.
I'll take it on board and give it consideration. You know, those are the 2 actions that I picked up. I didn't pick any others, actually.
Okay, I think between what Andrew's just said and Pamela will pick them up in moving forward. They can obviously clearly be addressed in the next meeting as well, moving forward, if that's satisfactory for yourself. Okay, someone prepared to move then, subject to those issues, the minutes to be a correct record?
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you, Dawn. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you very much. Everyone in favour of the minutes being a correct record, please show. Thank you. Item 4 then on the agenda is the Corporate Risk Register Quarter 4. Who's taking the report, please?
Sorry, everyone, my mic not working there. So I'm Tracy McKim. I'll take you through the report this afternoon, and I've got my colleague with me, Paul Flint, and we'll answer any questions. Quick reminder for the committee, we did talk last time, it was in the actions about doing some training on risk. I know you had financial training today, so we'll schedule the risk training for next time. So the responsibility of this committee is to look at the processes and to make sure that the processes around risk are robust and operating correctly, rather than the detail of the risks themselves, but we will cover that at the next session. So the way risks are identified, they're identified by heads of service, they come through a service planning process, and this is the result of the escalation of those risks by senior managers, the collation of risks at Corporate Risk Register, and this is the Q4 report for last year. As you'll see in the report, and the full risk register is attached, at the end of Q4, there were 16 risks recorded in the Corporate Risk Register. These are risks that are considered to have a significant impact on the achievement of the Council's objectives. There were no risks closed during that quarter, and 2 risks which were de-escalated. They were the in-year financial management concerns and the safeguarding risk. Overall, there are 9 severe risks, 7 major, and these are outlined in the report. And the Audit Committee, as I've said, comment on the processes, and then this report also goes to Cabinet for the detail around those risks and how they impact on service delivery. So I'll pause and take any questions on the report, Chair.
Thank you, Tracy. Are there any questions? Hopefully people can see hands raised before I can.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate all the work that has gone into this paper, which is very clear, and I understand completely that the committee needs to focus on process. But one of the things that I was concerned about was in the risk register, we have the action name and the action description, and if you go through it, they're much the same thing. It actually doesn't say what is being done in relation to the action and by when. You know, we've got ticks and stars, but it doesn't give me assurance that I understand what the action is needed, but what is being done is just not specified there. For example, take the first one, increase and improve Newport's urban tree coverage, action name. Action description, increase and improve Newport's urban tree coverage. Well, they're saying the same thing, and if you actually go through the register, there's numerous ones that are exactly the same. So it's a bit meaningless, really.
Tracy?
Thanks for the comment. Not to excuse it, but the risk register format comes out of our system, which is MI Herb, and you're right, those are similar. I guess I would draw your attention to the comments. So in the comments, that's where you'll see what's currently happening as regards that risk. So are you on page 36? So the comment being that works continue to deal with the tree stock, and that's the current work within this quarter. What we've avoided doing is producing a separate report for the committee that doesn't come out of our kind of automated system, really. So I think that's the duplication there.
So that I'm clear there, Tracy, are we talking then about direction of risk, with the comment there?
We are, yes. That's the current comment.
Right, so that's your comment.
Do you agree?
Well, I think my suggestion is I think we could improve it, you know, in terms of getting more assurance about what's actually been done and by when.
Hi, Chair. Paul Flint, Performance and Research Business Partner. So we will take those views on board, and we've got a meeting scheduled next month to look over the report. And as part of the new service planning process, we'll look to see if we can update the report so we can include comments against those actions where comments have been raised by the individual officers. So we'll look to see how we can improve the report around those. But just to add to Tracy's point, every quarter we ask the risk owners to provide a commentary update in terms of why a risk has increased or decreased or stayed the same every quarter. And then the risk action owners, then they also have to provide updates in terms of any risk mitigating actions that are ongoing there. So that's how the process works around around that. But yeah, we'll look into the reporting to try and improve it for you. Okay.
Thank you. Is that okay, Norma?
Chair, can I ask a question regarding
Sure. Yes.
on page 22 on the pressure on the housing and homelessness? I was wondering, with the number of Ukrainian evacuees that now are coming into Newport, has that been factored into the risk? Is that currently, and do we have a number of the evacuees that are coming and are expected, and the pressure that will be on that?
Thank you. It's an important point. So you'll see in the commentary on page 22 that the pressures on accommodation will be exacerbated, of course, the point you make. The numbers are difficult to be specific on because people from Ukraine are coming in on the Homes for Ukraine scheme and are currently often in temporary accommodation waiting to go to a house that's nominated for them, and therefore we don't yet know how many of those people we will need to house, because the nature of the scheme is to provide homes for people from the Ukraine. So that is difficult to quantify, but it is a sort of monthly factoring into this work around homelessness. So it's a constant check that we're doing there.
So, sorry, Tracy, just to the Ukrainian evacuees that are like in the Queen's Hotel and stuff now, are they between numbers, or are they where do they count?
Generally speaking, they are, without doing a check right now, generally speaking, these will be people that have come in on the Homes for Ukraine scheme, where either the property is still going through checks, or there's a delay because of a problem, or in some cases there may be breakdown of the scheme. Okay. So the accommodation wasn't suitable and there was a breakdown. But the intention is that very much that's temporary accommodation and new, if I call it placements, probably not the right term, but new places will be found. And you're right, that hotel, and there are others in Newport and indeed across Wales.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any other questions?
Sorry, Chair.
Come on, Jeff. Oh, yeah.
I'm on page 25.
I'm after you.
Is that me?
Yes, carry on.
Right. I know I raised this last time, so I'm sorry to be a pain about this, but on page 25, I just cannot get to understand how the equalities impact on here is not applicable, because if, let's for example look at page 20 and look at some of the issues there. Our role, according to the paper later on, our role is to ensure that the systems, processes, culture and values of the authority are being fulfilled, not to make judgments about particularly specific individual issues, but just to make the processes there. And that part of that process surely is, one of the processes, it's a legal obligation on the Council under the Equalities Act, is to ensure that there aren't particular groups who are being discriminated against. In my experience, it's very rare you come across positive discrimination, but often it's quite easy actually to set up processes which lead to indirect discrimination. And surely, again, we're to ensure that to monitor that the culture and values of the authority are being pursued, and clearly one of those is fairness and equality. And I don't see how we can actually do that, because if you look on page 20, for example, there's the whole issue of COVID. And what became absolutely clear from the whole COVID episode was there were certain groups, particularly ethnic minorities, that were massively more impacted than the white British majority. Again, if you look through this, things like out-of-county placements, issues like additional learning needs for children, or social services provision. Those are all issues, obviously, where we need to be ensuring that that all groups are being accessed, that you know, for example, I don't know, you can imagine a situation maybe where a figure is reducing, but perhaps it's reducing in a way that affects one particular group, maybe ethnic group or an age group or a gender group, but maybe isn't affecting another. And I just don't see how we get any sort of handle on whether that aspect of the council's work is being fulfilled. I mean, you know, for example, you know, is there any monitoring takes place? Because that's what I'd be used to seeing. I'd be used to seeing a situation where, without the county placements, for example, that they're actually broken down in terms of whether they're boys, whether they're girls, whether they're of a particular ethnic minority. Is that the case in terms of people taking up social services provision, which is really you're clearly under strain at the moment? Is the impact greater on one group than another? And I just can't understand how that can not be a concern of this particular paper, or how we can effectively do our job without without some sort of a handle on that.
Would you like me to answer, Chair?
Yes, please.
Of course, equalities is very important. I'm also the Council's equalities lead, and we take equalities very seriously. As an example, for COVID, we have a community impact assessment of how, which we can circulate, of how different communities were affected by COVID. It's a really important point. The equalities impact assessment is specifically around the decision. And this report is not around the decision. It is about the risk and the risk processes. So we have a number of reports that focus on equalities issues. Strategic Equalities Annual Report, just being compiled now. Every decision report, so some of the COVID decisions or out of county or whatever the decision is, that would have to have an equalities impact assessment. But this report does not relate to those decisions. We can make that clearer in the text in the report, I think, to explain why, because equalities is always relevant, but an equalities impact assessment is only needed for the decision, and this report is for the monitoring and not an explicit decision.
I never imagined for a moment the council wasn't doing monitoring, but it's just, if you were asking me to remember this committee and make a judgment about whether there's effective governance in terms of it being equitable and conforming to things like the Equalities Act, I'm not sure how I do that, because there's just nothing, there's nothing in the report. But anyway, I'll leave it there.
Thanks. We can, I think we can improve the wording to make that clearer about why that's the case and where those equalities decisions are then logged, which is against the decision generally.
I think, Tracy, one of the key issues that are coming out here is that training that needs to be undertaken, because there are things that will come to this committee which will be deciding in other places, in other council committees, scrutiny, etc. And we're there to monitor, to make sure that there's good governance. And ultimately, some of the issues you just raised will be dealt with elsewhere. You know, they'll be dealt with at various service departments and such like. I think the other thing in regards to training, and I've supporting Norma in regards to some of the issues, is that, and what Paul said, you're at the end of this sausage machine. A lot of the information in this document is provided by the service departments, so they update what is being done and how they're doing it. And I'd agree with Norma in some respects. It's that monitoring, it's that evaluation. It's very easy to say we will do this, but it's by when and who's going to do it, and if it's not being done, who's monitoring it. So I think it's just an exercise really for us, possibly in a training session, to tease out those issues a little bit more. And if the system can be improved, let's improve it, because we shouldn't be a hostage to the system. That's my initial view. So I think, if we can do that training, that would be great. The second question is, obviously, this is, the fourth, quarter four scenario is, are the risks re-evaluated on an annual basis, because I think it's been picked up by Don and others. We've got the cost of living crisis, we've got the energy crisis, etc., which are real risks, I think, to most of the general public. Will these be picked up as part of the exercise moving forward when the risk register comes up for a review?
Hi, Chair. So just to explain to the committee around the process around risk management. At the moment in the Council, we're going through a rigorous process in developing the new corporate plan. And as part of that corporate plan, service areas are now being asked to review their own service plans and also their own risks. So the risks that you will see in Q4, a lot of them will stay and are still relevant in terms of what we're delivering as a local authority. But as part of this review process, all the service areas will be asked to review their risks and to look at any emerging or new risks that the Council should be considering as either a service area risk or as part of the new corporate risk register. So we're undertaking that process at the moment. As you can imagine, it takes time to kind of get that process completed, and it will be there to support the new corporate plan when it comes into place later this year. So that's just one part of the process. Obviously, risk is continuous and it keeps on going and it doesn't stop. So what we also do every quarter is to just to kind of seek assurance from all of the service areas if there's any new emerging risks that happen throughout the year as well. So this is a continuous process in terms of what we do as an organisation in terms of managing risk. So it isn't just like a once a year type of thing. It is a thing that we do try to do constantly and to review and to kind of ensure that the risks stay relevant and that any emerging risks, as you raised there around cost of living, that those are captured somewhere in the organisation. So, yeah.
Okay. Tracy, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, and it's just to say, not to overcomplicate it, this report is one slice of our risk management, and we can talk about that at the training. But every project would have a risk log, every service plan would have its own risks identified, and not all of those risks make it up to this level, but are important risks to different levels of service delivery. So you're seeing the top slice of risk within the organisation. And we are continuing to develop that. We've got a risk management policy that confirms the way we manage risk. We're keen to keep on top of things like our risk appetite and making sure that we're both managing risks but also expecting risk, because with risk comes opportunity. And so there are very many layers to this, and you're seeing that top slice of that and making sure that we're doing the right things, I guess, at that top level.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, Tracy. But I do think this training session, I think, will be essential if we can get that organised as soon as possible. I know it's August next month with holiday season, but as soon as possible after sort of August, really, that would be great. Are there any other questions from anyone? Are there any?
Yeah, Chair, I have a question. That's okay, sorry. One on page 47, where it's got the education out of county placements. I know it's really frustrating because in some ways you're doing the risk thing from Q4, yet you're referring to a successful bidder being in place for September, and here we are in nearly August. And what my question is that successful bidder in place already? Because we're 5 weeks away. And will that have an impact on? Will that have an impact on the numbers so that the risk score will actually go down?
I can't answer that question. I'll have to try and find that out from Education Services around that answer. But we can come back to you if required. And then, obviously, as officers review their risks every quarter, we're currently going through that process. So we'll find out at the end of that process. So you'll have that in terms of whether the risk has gone up or down following the Q1 risk review, which will be presented to the next audit committee in September.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Paul. Are there any other questions anywhere? Difficult for me to see, unfortunately. If there are no questions, any comments from anyone? Norma?
Thank you, Chair. I just have one comment that might be useful for officers, and I appreciate how difficult it is for you, because you're representing one of the people are giving you. But one of my thoughts was, particularly looking at the housing issue, was I was looking, you know, bear in mind we're looking at process, where's the strategic overlook here? You know, you have a number of actions, but they don't sort of all add together for me. So perhaps going forward, it might be quite useful to look at these issues a bit more strategically. You know, if I go through the housing one, you've got research on this, developing strategy in this area, managing in this area, but actually, strategically, we have a big risk here, and we're only, at this committee, concerned with the top level, as you rightly say, but it's just a bit down there rather than up there. You know, I don't get the holistic view. Is that clear in terms of where I'm coming from?
We take those points on board around, you know, providing the more strategic view. As you say, this is only, and as Tracy's pointed out, this is only a snapshot in terms of what goes on around the risk management and kind of the risk appetite. As we're going through this process, obviously, as Tracy's pointed out, we are looking at the new processes and developing those processes. So we can provide that in terms of any kind of strategic oversight. And just to kind of, so you understand a little bit more around the risk process, when risks are reviewed by the service areas and the risk owners, the corporate risk register is presented to the council, to the council's executive board. They've reviewed the corporate risk register, and they determine whether those risks reflect accurately in terms of what's being faced across the organisation. In addition to that, the executive board do challenge reviews in terms of risks and risks that are not improving or deemed to be improving. So we consistently review that and challenge those officers in terms of, okay, what's happening around those risks? Are those risk mitigating actions sufficient enough in order to reduce that risk in the long term? Because ideally, that's what we're trying to get towards, is reducing that risk for the organisation, so it doesn't occur, or if it does occur, that we have those correct controls in place to manage that impact on the organisation. So we'll take on board those points made, and we'll have a look at that going forward. Okay.
Thank you, Paul. If there's no one else showing,
could I, Chair, please?
Any interest?
Could I just ask a question?
Yes.
About underspend. That I think it's page 86. That it explains that inevitably, because of COVID, etc., that there was an underspend. And various savings.
Are we, sorry, Councillor Cox, is that page 86? That's on another item, is it?
Is that? Yeah. I'm sorry, I thought we're still on. Ah, right, I'm sorry, I thought we were asking for questions generally on the, what, on the report?
We're dealing with the corporate risk register.
Oh, right, okay. Sorry, I'll come back to it later.
Yeah, I think you're dealing with the statement of accounts at the moment.
I'm totally confused.
If there are no other comments or on the corporate risk register, someone prepared to move the recommendation. I think that we note the corporate risk register and the appendices, subject to the comments made by the members. Are people content with that recommendation?
Yes, I'm happy to move, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Don. Someone move, someone second. Thank you, Norma. All in favour? Please show. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tracy and Paul. Item 5, then, we're dealing with the regulatory reports 21-22 update.
Thank you, Chair. This is a relatively new report because the committee changed its terms of reference following the Local Government and Elections Act, and an important part of the committee's role is now to take a report on all inspection reports from all regulators, so whether that be Estyn or the Care Inspectorate Wales or Audit Wales. And this is a collation of the most recent reports, which are all public documents that affect all our services. Similar to the last report, actions on these are covered elsewhere. So the Education Service will consider their actions as part of their service planning and so on. So this is a collation of those reports to make sure we're aware of them and that we are acting on the detail. We've got 3 local reports from Audit Wales, as you'll see, which is the audit of our accounts, the Cremation Committee and the Improving Reporting Audit. We've got a number of, sorry, just the one national review. And what a national review is it's not just about Newport. It's a review of many authorities in Wales. Generally, we're cited in it, but it's a national review. And we've got a small number of reviews ongoing. The national ones are Building Resilience, Self-Reliance in Citizens, and a Poverty Review. These are very much around Springing Forward, which is a sort of COVID-themed review. We've also got local reviews into the Newport Intelligence Hub, which is almost completed, and workforce planning. Both of those are in my area, and once they're completed, we'll report back to you on those. From Care Inspectorate Wales, so I'm on page 65 of the report, there's been one national review during this period, which is around the early help, care and support of disabled children in Wales. Again, this is national rather than local. However, we make a statement on it and we review any actions. And then from Estyn, we've got several reports in this period, thematic and local inspection reports. I won't repeat all of them, but they're listed on page 66 and 67, which includes the positive inspection report around St Julian's School, around Liswerry High School and the Bridge Achievement Centres. So they're obviously very focused reports, and you'll see in the final column there the statements around the actions the council is taking. And just to go back to that point, this is not necessarily where those actions are monitored. These will all be present in service plans and repeated elsewhere. So I'll pause there for questions.
Any questions? No questions?
Chair,
Tracy, can I just pick up? Oh, sorry.
No, you carry on, Gareth, because I'm hoping you're going to say what I was going to say. That would be better coming from you.
Oh, right. Tracy, it's similar to the point that was made earlier, and I can understand where you were saying that lots of this detail, evidence, whatever, is in other service plans are being dealt with in different places. However, for me on this Governance Audit Committee, A, I don't know where to look for it. B, I don't have the documentation because presumably they go other places in the council. And C, the question I pose is, so what? All the NCC position statements for me, whilst they're quite good in narrative form, they tell me very little in reality as to what's happening. If we looked at the first one, which I was looking at, in regards to the CIW report, early healthcare support and that, the report identifies 17 actions. We've got a lot of obviously we've got the narrative there in regards to the position statement. The end part saying the findings and actions are being considered by both service areas as part of the new corporate plan and service development plan. And as I said, the question I pose is, so what? So what are they doing about the 17 actions that have been identified? Are they actually taking any action, or are they doing nothing? Who's monitoring what's being done? And again, who's evaluating progress around that recommendation? And it's hopefully, don't see this as a criticism, please, but the issue for me, again, is in regards to the schools. Yes, they've been taken out of special measures, or they've been taken out of Estin monitoring. But again, the whole issue goes on around if they've identified failings in the past, but now they're getting out of it. The worst case scenario is just let them carry on and, either they'll redress back to where they were previously, or without any action plan or monitoring or evaluation, then how do we know they're going to get better and improve? So it's the whole amount of data and information. Ultimately I don't want War and Peace, because clearly you could have that on each of them. But it's actually knowing that they dealt with the recommendations appropriately, properly, and someone in the organisation is monitoring and evaluating. And if in the future we said, right, actually, we need to know where they are in, say, Julian's or wherever they are, which schools, or in regards to CIW, that someone can come forward and actually give us an honest opinion, which hopefully we'll already know where they were going because we've had that report. So that's my only concern about lots of these issues.
Chair, can I just say I support you on that, because I actually picked up exactly the same point. Whereas with the Estin reports, I had some clarity in terms of what was being done. But in terms of that one report on care and support of disabled children, I picked up exactly the same point as you did.
Sorry, Tracy.
Thank you both. It's fine. It's a relatively new report to the committee. There was previously no similar collation of all reports. They are reported within their own governance remit, so to that cabinet member or to cabinet or to wherever is appropriate. And the monitoring happens within service management, within cabinet member portfolios, depending on the level of the recommendation. And I guess that was my introduction, was trying to say that these things are picked up elsewhere. They are monitored within service plans. Every service plan goes to scrutiny, both at its inception and at the end of the year, and sometimes at the mid-year point as well. It is difficult, I think, to provide a really meaningful composite report that speaks to the committee without it being filling all of these papers and more, because each of these reports will be 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 pages long, and some of them are national, so they don't wholly relate to us. Of the 17 or 19 recommendations, maybe only 4 were relevant to Newport, and so on. It is easier, I think, with the education ones to see that they're definitely targeted at us and all of the actions are ours, and therefore this is what has happened. I mean, what I can say in declaring a slight interest, I was made chair of St Julian's when it went into special measures, so I'm very familiar with that format. There is rigorous checks on all inspection activities at every level, with our partners, the EAS, at Director of Education level, with the Cabinet member. And if that weren't the case, they wouldn't have come out of special measures. Estin are, really tough inspectorate, as you might imagine. So I guess with this report, it's about getting the level right. If we repeated everything in those reports, it would be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages long. And we are trying to give a sense of what has happened. I guess we could add where those decisions are monitored so that there's a cross-reference into those other services. But we also have scrutiny committee who are scrutinising directly those pieces of work.
Chair, can I come in a minute, really? Because I understand the difficulty, and I don't think this committee wants reams and reams of papers. All we are seeking is assurance. And when I read words, I always think, can I actually feel this? Can I understand what is being done? And when you read, what were the words that findings and actions are being considered just as part of new corporate plan and service plan development. It's 8 months since we've had that report, and I would be asking myself, well, actually, I want to know a bit more than that. And actually, I only want 3 lines, to say, these recommendations are being taken forward, but just something to give us assurance that something is happening. Being considered doesn't tell us anything. Sorry to, and I know Tracy's not.
Thank you. I'll just take those comments on board.
I think we just want something that's simple that gives us assurance that something is happening and so somebody's monitoring it.
I guess the only thing I would add, take those comments on board, is some of the actions are very long term. If I take the case of St Julian's, was it in special measures for 3 years, 2.5 years? I should know. But these are not things that are fixed within a quarter or a 6 months or a year period. They are often changes of policy, changes of strategy. They do need to be considered in, say, the new corporate plan. And other things are direct recommendations that can be made quite quickly. So there is something about the timeliness. I'm conscious you'll have another one of these soon, and we might not have done the actions on that because there'll be long-term actions, and the committee's right to ask those questions. There aren't answers to all of those questions.
I think I understand all that, and I think ultimately this is a learning lesson for us all. This is new. You've got a new audit committee. You've got obviously new members here. But I think, again, just reiterate what Norm, I said, it's that assurance I think we need that where recommendations are made by national regulators, ESTIN, CIW, or whatever, is that they're actually being taken serious. And I think the issue you've raised, Tracy, in regards to ESTIN and being within a school that was under special measures, the first thing they will ever do is to say, look, here's a report. We recommended A, B, C and D 10 years ago. What have you done about it? And if you can't demonstrate you've done something, then, you're in the mire immediately. So it's just that reassurance that if we just take the CIW one, there are 17 actions there, some narrative to say, right, 5 have been taken on board and they've been implemented in whatever, 6 are still being worked on, and 3 we don't believe is relevant to us. And I think that's the ultimate aim for us, to be given that assurance and that reassurance, because ultimately what we don't want is the committee to call in the Director of Social Services and say, let's see what you're doing on these 17 recommendations. So I think it's a learning exercise for us all, and maybe again that a discussion outside this forum to see how we can get a little bit more meat on the bone, rather than a very sort of lots of narrative which means very little. Are committee happy with that?
Yeah, Chair.
Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry, Councillor.
No
so you were right at the very back.
Yeah, sorry. My name is Councillor Jordan. I missed the last meeting, so you're new to me because I've been on audit committee for the last 5 years. With the inspector report, the ESTA report, I know some members, the new members, but beforehand, I think we used to have a bit of a breakdown, didn't it, what sort of measures they went into. So sometimes it's good to have that bit of breakdown to say what measures they were and what's gone on. Going back to the Bridge Achievement Centre, that was quite a big one, I think, for Andrew when they did an audit on that, and there was quite a lot of people, quite a lot of work need to be done, and I'm glad to see it's come out, the special measures, nearly after 4 years, so it was good.
Thank you, Councillor Jordan. Okay, are there any other questions from anyone? Any comments? Again, I think the recommendation is that we note the contents of the report, subject to the comments being taken forward, if they can, by the officers in regards to the issues raised. Someone prepared to move?
I'll move.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Don. Can I have a show of hands, please? All in favour? Thank you, members. The next item on the agenda is the draft statement of accounts.
Thank you, Chair. Rob Green, Assistant Head of Finance. I'll take you through this item. So obviously we've had a training session earlier today, so I'm conscious that a lot of that background has been given, but equally that not all members were able to be present for that training. So what you've got before you today is the draft statement of accounts for the 21-22 financial year. You'll note, and you'll be aware, that your responsibility as Governance and Audit Committee, your role is to ultimately sign off the final statement of accounts, which will be brought to the meeting that's scheduled for October of this year. So as I said before, what you've got in front of you is the draft statement of accounts today, and you're being asked to note those accounts and ask any questions or pass any comments as you may have. So in terms of, obviously the bulk of the item is the accounts themselves. That's the appendix. That's a very large, significant, complex document. There is a covering report, so I'll just quickly talk through the main aspects of the covering report and then take any questions you may have at that point. So really, it's just a one-page report that gives you the background. So as it says here, talks about the regulations that ultimately underpin our production of the accounts and the process we go through in terms of signing them off. As I said, you'll receive these alongside Audit Wales's final report in October. And that report from Audit Wales will ultimately provide an opinion on the accounts. Do they present a true and fair view? Is it a qualified or hopefully unqualified audit opinion that's being recommended? It will also identify any issues, misstatements that have been either observed and rectified or remain uncorrected within the accounts for your consideration. So as I said before, this is to provide you with an early sight of the accounts in draft form as they are. In the report, we've highlighted very high level the process that we go through. And there's a table there with a number of dates for your interest. It should be noted that actually those dates have shifted on a week since this report was drafted. So actually the public inspection period will commence on the 15th of August, not the 8th of August. Obviously the 27th of October deadline will not move because that is the date that's fixed for this committee meeting. So in terms of where we are with the process, the accounts have been drafted, the Head of Finance has authorised those, and they have been handed to Audit Wales, who are now undertaking their external audit work with a view to ultimately producing their opinion. The covering report provides a little bit of information in terms of the experience we've had this year in producing the accounts. It goes without saying it's been another extremely challenging process, much like the year before, and that is predominantly a direct consequence of the pandemic and the additional complexities that's thrown up, and also the additional volume of work that has been created through, for example, additional grants that we've had to administer throughout the year, and which in itself has presented an additional reporting requirement as well in terms of how some of those grants are passported through the Council from Welsh Government onto other bodies. There is a reference there around our service and the challenges we've faced, notably the fact that we are also in the process of implementing a new finance system, which is an incredibly in-depth task and time-consuming task, which has sort of resulted in key officers having to try and prioritise two key pieces of work at a very already busy time of year. So what that meant is that the draft accounts were signed off in early July, which was later than we'd been aiming for. It is later than the deadline that the Accounts and Audit Regulations set out, but it's not uncommon across other local authorities in Wales. That is also the case, and we duly publicise that fact, so we are compliant in that regard. As it says here, the accounts themselves, and as we talked through in the training earlier, it's an incredibly technical document. It's an incredibly detailed document. It's a very long document. It's probably helpful to read the accounts in conjunction with other reports that we have recently produced, such as the outturn reports for both revenue and capital for the 21-22 financial year. Although, having said that, there is a narrative section at the beginning of the statement of accounts, which does provide a slightly more user-friendly overview of the activity and position financially for the authority last year, and highlights key facts such as the level of revenue underspend, the level of reserves increase for the last financial year. So really that is it in terms of an overview. I said you've got the accounts in front of you. You can read them at your leisure. You may have already read them, but obviously if you do have questions on the specifics of the accounts, we can do our best to address them. But I suppose it's more about you taking assurance from the process that we go through in conjunction with the external auditor, ultimately culminating in you receiving the final amended accounts in October for sign-off. So, yeah, if there are any questions, please ask, but also, obviously, with the size of the document, be helpful to be directed to exactly where those questions arise from. Okay.
Thank you for that, Robert. Obviously, members have had the draft statement of accounts, so hopefully they can direct you to the specific page and paragraph. So if there are any questions, are there any questions?
Yes, Chair. Chair,
Thank you.
on page 88, on the total expenditure, how come there's so much a vast amount on the budget for 117.5 million?
Can I just clarify, is that page 88 of the reports pack or 88 of the statement of accounts document?
The header for narrative report for statement of accounts on the capital programme, page 88, where you've got the total expenditure for actual 2018, 19, 19, 20, 2021. I'm looking at the 2022, 23. There's a total expenditure of 117.5 million, where the previous years are quite low and next 2 years are quite low. But how comes that's such a mass expenditure?
Okay, yeah, no, thank you for that question. So yeah, the important thing to note here is obviously we've got actual costs for the years that have passed, and then we've got a budgeted cost for future years. One of the main aspects of capital financing and capital reporting is that often there is slippage between years. So unlike a revenue budget, which is very much the year in question, a capital programme can extend across multiple years. So we set a budget at the start of the programme window, a 5-year window, based on what we anticipate the spend to be in each year. But ultimately, and I guess the pandemic has exacerbated this fact, is schemes will slip for a variety of reasons. That can be due to weather. That can be, if it's a case of a school project, if we miss a school holiday window to do work, it can push it on. But also sometimes the profiling can be overly optimistic in the first place, underestimating how many challenges, say, the planning process might throw up or something like that. So slippage is a common occurrence. And what has basically happened here is we've had an ambitious capital programme which has seen an increase in the anticipated spend, in the planned spend, to deliver a number of high-profile schemes, and those have slipped, and naturally that has pushed on some of this spend into future years. It's important to note, though, that the figure in 22-23, as you've outlined, is incredibly high and significantly higher than has ever been spent before. We recognise and acknowledge that, and that is something that the authority are looking at quite closely. We're actually in the process of reprofiling this budget to try and reduce that to a more realistic deliverable figure in the financial year. So when we report our first capital monitoring position, which will go to Cabinet, I think, in September of this year, what you'll see is the product of that reprofiling exercise. That figure will have come down, and there will have been a shift into future years. So you have a more realistic profile then, but it will still be a significantly higher figure, and that's mainly because there are some very high-profile schemes that are on site that will deliver this year. So just to give an example of that, Basil Egg High School scheme, which is a huge multi-million scheme, is on site. A lot of costs are being incurred month by month, so there will be a big spend in that area. So it won't be as high a figure, but it will still be higher than in previous years, and then we'll monitor that throughout the year and adjust it accordingly. Okay.
Are there any other questions?
Chair,
No?
Yeah, I apologise. I think I'm on the right place on the agenda.
You are? No,
I am, yeah. I'll organise my notes better for the next meeting. Okay. Well, yeah, it sort of relates to what the comment that's just been made, that I think I can understand where the slippage in capital has gone, and the sort of slippage, because there has been slippage in revenue spending as well, hasn't it? Actually says here there's been some departments have had a significant underspend, and on page 86 it talks about some of them have been staff savings, and some of them have been normal services were basically just not functioning at that time. So my question really is about that. I mean, presumably, if there's a whole lot of things in simple terms that the authority was hoping to do that year and didn't because of COVID, there must be a backlog of services not delivered, and I'm assuming that some of that backlog would be have more impact on people in certain areas than it would maybe in others. And I just wonder what process there's been for looking at that backlog and actually, coming up with a strategy to address it.
Yeah, no, it's a perfectly valid question, and thank you for that question. So revenue and capital are different. So the underspend that was incurred in revenue, we don't sort of simply roll that on forward like we do with capital. But obviously, if there is an underspend, we have the opportunity to do something with that underspend. And what's happened this year is that's been transferred to earmarked reserves. So it's then being held for specific purposes going forward. Some of which may relate to the very services you're referring to in terms of where there is perhaps a backlog and there's funding being put aside for use in the future year to help address that backlog. But there is a process around that. So one of the things that we have, or the council approved for the 22-23 revenue budget, was a sort of COVID risk mitigation fund. For the last 2 years, Welsh Government have provided a lot of hardship funding to cover those additional costs. That ended for 22-23. So the council has created its own internal fund, and that will be used on a very sort of prioritised basis to address a number of sort of COVID legacy issues, one of which is sort of backlogs in service delivery. So where, for example, a service couldn't function as it would normally have done during the pandemic and now has a backlog to address, they can apply and sort of access that funding to be able to put the additional capacity in place to address that backlog. And that process will then be reviewed by the Council's Executive Board throughout the year. And as and when those sort of issues emerge, those decisions can be made, that funding can be allocated. And in addition, also, Welsh Government have provided in some areas, and this has sort of been seen in some of the schools, where funding was provided late last financial year to address some of that kind of catch-up aspect, but to be used in this financial year. So there's a mixed approach, but it is very much sort of acknowledged and being monitored in terms of trying to address those issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Dom?
Yeah, sorry, Rob, pensions, which I know no one wants to talk about pensions, but the 73 million dip, is that a blip for this financial year, or is that the start of a trend? Is it going to go up to 475 again, down? Page 92 of the agenda notes, where it's starting paragraph 2, where the unfunded liability has been reduced by 72 million.
I'll attempt to answer the question. I think some of the explanation is there. So obviously that's a reduction in liability. So that's actually a positive movement insofar as the liability that still remains unfunded is now less than it was. As it says there, a lot of that was around performance of investments. Going forward, it's obviously a very difficult one to see where that will go, and the economic situation as it is at the moment creates even more uncertainty. I guess taking a fairly simplistic sort of look at it, obviously interest rates have started to sort of incrementally increase of late. It is anticipated that they will increase further, so there is the potential that the funds will continue to perform well. That funding side of the sort of pension fund equation could actually result in that kind of funding aspect improving further. But obviously there are two elements, the other aspect being the future liability. So obviously on a constant basis, those actuarial assumptions are being reviewed. As life expectancy increases, the liability increases. So I can't make a forecast around that, but I suppose just taking those factors into account, I think it's probably reasonable to say that investments at least might continue to perform as they have. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in on that point. I see Mark's.
I could just mention also, because we'll be reporting this every single year, but this pension liability is a long-term liability. So when the actuaries assess the state of the fund, they are looking at a 20-year horizon in terms of employers and employee contribution rates in terms of managing the fund over that sort of time horizon, so that you will get, and sometimes you'll just get accounting issues or actuarial assumptions that create really big movements in funding positions. But it's important to say that we should be looking at it over the long term, and the triennial valuations that happen do exactly that. They usually take a 20-year view in terms of dealing with the valuation issues that are present.
Does that have any impact on usable reserves?
No, because...
Mark, did you want to pick that? Mark, you've got your hand raised. Did you want to pick that up? Would that help, Myron?
Only if Marion's finished. I think he has all the answers to hand, but I could probably add a bit to the conversation if you like.
Mark's the expert. Go on, Mark.
So we don't tend to get excitable about investment returns on an annual basis for the very reasons that Marion's described. And actually, this is a long-term commitment and liability, and the actuary will look at it over a long period of time in providing us with new rates to charge. What I would say is that this year, has it been unusual? Well, it's been unusual on the back of the previous financial year. So this is a rebalancing of the equity portfolio based on the fact that a lot of stock market valuations crashed and share valuations crashed immediately following the COVID epidemic. The worldwide markets were depleted. This is bouncing back a bit into more of a state of normality. So yes, it shows quite a large variation, but it really ought to be taken in context of the previous dip from the last year.
Thank you for that, Mark. Don, does that deal with your question?
Thank you very much, yes.
Okay, are there any other questions? Rob, can I just pose hopefully a relatively simple question? Given the draft statement of accounts have now been submitted to Audit Wales, can you confirm that there should be a notice posted somewhere that should any member of the public or actual elected representative wish to raise issues again about the statement of accounts, then they can do so through that public notice provision direct to Audit Wales. So, you know, if any members of the public wish to raise issue about the draft statement of accounts, and who may wish to watch this this on their machine, just to confirm that process. Sorry, Mark?
Absolutely, Chair. We're in the process of actually putting those formal notifications on the notice board in the Civic Centre and the Customer Care Centre, and there will be a notice on the internet as well, signposting people to how they can access this.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Mark. Are there any other questions? Any comments? If there are no comments, then can we move to the recommendation, which is to note the draft 2021-22 statement of accounts? Someone prepared to move, please?
I'll move that.
Thank you very much.
I'll
Someone
second.
prepared to second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All show that they're in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Next report is the internal audit plan.
Thanks, Chair.
Andrew, is that you?
It is me, Chair. Thank you. Andrew Wathen, Chief
Thank you.
Internal Auditor. And this evening I've brought my audit managers with me, who are Donna Palmer and Jan Furtek. And between us, we'll respond to any members' questions at the end. So hopefully we'll cover all the angles and all the bases. So this is the revised internal audit plan for 22-23. Hopefully members will remember that we brought a draft internal audit plan to you in your May's committee meeting. We went away because that was not balanced. Our resources were less than the audit days planned in that particular report. So we've gone away, we've reviewed the planning process, we've reviewed the audit jobs that we were going to undertake, and now I'm reporting in that we are now matching the number of audit days in the plan to the resources we have available. So the plan will be based on us delivering 1,073 audit days. And in terms of the expectations of this committee, I would like the committee members to note and to approve the revised internal audit plan for 22-23. So what's changed? The detail of the planning process I've reported to you previously, so I won't go through that again. But just to reiterate, previously we had 1,147 audit days in the plan, but resources of 998. So there was a mismatch in terms of we'd overplanned, stroked, under-resourced the plan. We've reviewed the situation, and now we have 1,073 audit days in the plan and 1,073 audit days available as an audit resource. So what's changed? The main change is that we are now reporting on the new service area structure for the organisation with the new 11 heads of service and their service area responsibilities. We've taken into account an additional 75 days from an external support. Previously I was being prudent because we hadn't agreed that at that time. The number of audit opinion jobs is reduced from 67 to 62, and the number of non-opinion jobs is reduced from 29 to 28. But that number is still significant enough to give me assurance that I have enough opinions across all audits undertaken to enable me to provide an overall opinion at the year end. In terms of the summary, that's shown in Appendix 1 and the details shown in Appendix 2. In terms of flexibility, Chair, priorities change within the year, risk profiles change in the year, and we will between the three of us, we will be monitoring this as we progress and reporting back to you as a committee any concerns we have in terms of delivery of that audit plan on a quarterly basis. So without going into the detail, Chair, if I can refer members to Appendix 1. That shows the summary of where we intend delivering our audit days across all service areas. And Appendix 2 goes into the detail of the individual jobs. I don't intend to go through those individually, but they're there for information for members to see what individual jobs we are covering and in what particular service areas and how much time we'll be spending on them and whether it's opinion related or not. So at that stage, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you for that, Andrew, and presenting the appendices. Are there any questions from members? I can't see any hands because my camera's on you, Andrew.
Chair, it doesn't appear to be any questions at the moment.
Okay, if there are no questions, just one for me. I think it's ensuring that you have the flexibility to move some of these issues around should something come as a priority. And I think what you've just said is you've now got that flexibility, and clearly because it's an organic sort of programme of inspections, if something comes to light more urgent or greater priority, then you'll be able to fit that in somewhere in the programme.
That's right, Chair.
So, yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Are there any comments?
No, Chair, I've got a question. I know,
Oh,
Andrew,
yes,
we had a bit of over a few years ago with the Gwent Music Service. It's still on a high risk. Has anything been done about that since back last year, or maybe the year before?
Okay, thanks, Chair. It's in the plan for this year, so this is the plan for 22-23. It's high risk because we perceived it to be a unsatisfactory opinion previously. We've asked for a position statement from the service manager, and that's come forward to us. We've incorporated that into our planning process, and we'll be undertaking that within the next couple of months and reporting back into Audit Committee the revised audit opinion.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, are there any comments? If there are no comments, can we move to the recommendation, which is that the revised internal audit plan 2022-23 be noted and approved by the committee? Can I have someone to move, please?
Yeah, I move, Chair.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Can I have a show of hands, please? All in favour of the recommendation? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very much for that. Next item on the agenda is I should imagine, Standing Order 24. Andrew, is that yours?
Thank you, Chair. Andrew Wathen, Chief Internal Auditor. This is me. This is a report in terms of Standing Order 24 and stroke waiving of contract standing orders, which is brought into the Governance and Audit Committee to demonstrate good governance. These are options that members have to deal with certain circumstances they might find themselves in during the year, and it's brought through to Audit Committee to make sure there's a justifiable reason and members are happy that there's a justifiable reason for using Standing Order 24 or for waiving our Council's contract standing orders. So Standing Order 24 is an urgent decision which is made by a Cabinet member or the leader for a specific issue that an officer may have in terms of dealing with operational business. That generally goes through without any consultation from other members. So it's unusual, but it's a process in place that can happen, and I've encouraged authors of those reports to make sure there's an appropriate justification in the reports and the information they're presenting to the Cabinet member in order for them to make that decision. In terms of waiving contract standing orders, we have those in place for the appropriate procurement of goods and services within Newport City Council, and there is an option to waive them. And again, Cabinet member decision to waive contract standing orders, and there must be an appropriate justification for doing so. It can't be just to circumvent our current process for convenience. So, expectations for the committee are to consider the report in front of you today and to see if you're happy with the justifications that have been provided for the use of Standing Order 24 or waiving of contract standing orders. In this particular, and this is a quarterly report that gets brought into Governance and Audit Committee. So, in this particular issue, in this report, it only relates to the waiving of contract standing orders. So I provided some additional information around thresholds of our own contract standing orders and the OJ procurement thresholds as well, just as background information for members, Chair. But the crux of this report is on page 249. This is in relation to the housing support grant, where officers have waived the contract standing orders to extend certain contracts for up to 2 years, up to 2024, to deal with the housing support programme. The report is attached. My comments are on the right-hand side. What I'm saying and advising to members is that there is appropriate justification within the reports. It is covered off by the procurement officer, by the chief financial officer and the monitoring officer, who are all happy that it was the appropriate thing to do at that particular time. So in this circumstance, Chair, I'll be not recommending members call in any service managers or Cabinet member to justify the reasons for using the waiving of contract standing orders, and just to note and accept the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Are there any questions from members?
Chair, I was just...
Norma?
Thank you, Chair. I was just curious that this review and this new way of commissioning will be completed by the time these extended contracts come to an end.
Thanks for the question. I can find out, because it's service related. I don't know the details of that. I just make sure that the appropriate process has been taken and there's an appropriate justification for using the waiving of contract standing orders. But if that's a concern of the member, I will make sure I find out and respond next time.
I think that's fair enough. I think I'm certainly satisfied that the process has been gone through thoroughly. Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any comments, if there are no further questions? Just a comment from me, Andrew. I think given this report was October 21, and we're now in July 22, is the length of time it's taken to get to us in regards to the process, because clearly the decision will have been made, actions will have been taken, and there was very little that we as a committee could have done about it in any event. So that's my first. Is this done in a timely manner? Were you notified in a timely manner to put in place the relevant checks and balances? And secondly, whilst I understand, they've used the urgency provision, lots of these contracts have been in place for, almost 5-6 years. And surely some of the service managers will have known that these were coming to an end at some stage. And is there anywhere in the organisation there's a contracts register which would have actually flagged these issues up to say we need to do something about these? Because I think it's picking up Norma's point. I would want to be reassured now that these are going through the correct process before we get to March 23. What we don't want is a report now in October 22 to you to say, oh, we need to do an urgency again. So I think that's the only concern I've got in regards to these issues. I'm content. I don't think happy would have been the right terminology for me for the monitoring officer and the chief finance officer. Most of them are never happy. But in regards to this, I should imagine they were content in regards to dealing with this issue and going through the process. But, we just clearly you cannot let these things continue on. We wouldn't want to be in the same position in October 22.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
No, thank you, Chair. Absolutely valid points. In terms of first point, these reports will come through to Governance and Audit Committee on a quarterly basis. Unfortunately, for some reason, this report slipped through the net and wasn't reported in the appropriate quarter. In terms of the second point, yes, we do have a corporate contract register. I will need to check that these contracts are actually on there. I'm not familiar with that on a day-to-day basis. But that is also a very valid comment to justify calling in the particular service manager and the cabinet member who've made that decision to challenge them in terms of why there was a delay in renewing those particular contracts.
Yeah, I think it's an easy. I don't mean it's an easy process. An easy thing to do to say, oh well, we've forgotten to do X, Y, and Z. Let's just extend it. It puts you in a very difficult position. It puts the council in a very difficult position. And clearly, there are processes in place which people need to comply with. So, I'd be guided by yourselves in some respects. Whether we should call a cabinet member in and the service manager in is another issue. All I want is the same reassurance that Norma wanted, that these matters are now being dealt with in accordance with the provisions, in accordance with the procurement provisions of the council, and that we're not going to get into the same state as we did 12 months ago, near enough.
Thanks, Chair. I think that's a very valid point. As I say, I'm dealing with the process here in terms of that particular issue. I can clarify with the service managers and get a status progress report and report back into committee.
That's lovely. Thank you. And again, Andrew, I apologise, don't mean to criticise you, but you're again at the end of the sausage machine here and picking up the pieces in regards to people possibly not doing what they should have done in an earlier time. Okay. I think the recommendation is, let me just get it up. Do we just note this, Andrew?
That's the
we approve.
That's the suggestion, Chair. But if you're picking up on your comment about calling in the service manager for your concerns, then that's entirely up to you as members of this committee to do so.
Yeah, I think Whether we approve the waiving of the contract standing order, I think we note, my own view is, subject to what the members think, is we note the decisions made in regards to this matter and your professional view in regards to them moving forward. But I do think, you know, if you can get clarity from the service manager that these matters are now being dealt with, then clearly I don't think I would want to call them in again unless it happened again. So if members are happy with that, rather than approve the waiving of it, because actually it's been done.
I agree. I agree, Chair. I think we should note it. We can note it, but I think also we should lay a marker down that if this gets used or abused, then we call in the service managers to explain. Yeah,
thank you, Don, for that. Hopefully, Paula, you can, Pamela, you can get a recommendation or a resolution out of the nuts and bolts of that for us moving forward, as long as members of the committee are happy or content.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Jenkins. I'm taking the minutes tonight, okay?
Oh, hello.
Hello, hi.
Yeah, so I think basically we note that, and basically the second point is to put a marker down that, you know, we don't wish to see these used as a regular occurrence. And if we do, then the likelihood is that we'll be calling in the cabinet member and the service director.
Yes,
Someone
Chair.
prepared to move that Someone prepared to move that recommendation?
Chair, I move. Chair.
Thank you, Norma. Someone prepared to second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Don. Can I have a show of hands, please, in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. Next item on the report is the work programme. The draft work programme.
Chair, nobody's speaking on this, so I'll speak up. This is just a notification of your expected reports, which are coming into Governance and Audit Committee over a period of time, over the next couple of Governance and Audit Committee meetings, going into May 2023. They're there for information so members can anticipate what's coming forward. They can be flexible, and if there are any changes, they'll be reported into you on your briefing pre-audit Governance and Audit Committee. Some things may need to be brought forward or moved back, and obviously we'll make members aware of those when that happens.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Andrew. Clearly, it just sets out what we're going to do next meeting, and as long as it is flexible and can accommodate anything further, should the needs arise or be dropped off, then hopefully there's no real issues there. Any questions on it? Any?
Chair,
yes,
can I just ask, please, can I ask, please, Chair, that
yeah,
I'd be interested to know, obviously I'm new on the committee, I have to excuse my ignorance maybe in some areas at the moment, that I'm not quite sure how this was put together. Is this put together because these are just coming along at this particular time, and for statutory regulatory reasons they need to be dealt with at that time, or are they ones that are coming along because they deem to be a particular priority within the authority, etc.? I mean, because well, that'd be very, very helpful to know, and also without knowing a little more as well, it's very difficult for us to say that we'd like so and so to come along to the meeting to be present here, as it's suggesting that we may want to invite people. To be quite honest, just at the moment, on the level of information I've got, I'm not sure if I would want to, or if I did, who I'd want to invite.
Yeah, Chair, thanks. So a number of items on this agenda will be regular scheduled items that you will see every year. So you get the Treasury management reports, so you'll see that 3 times a year, probably in the same month every year. You'll see the annual accounts. They will be dealt with in September, October time. Yeah, so those things are sort of regular. And there will be, on occasions, issues that you may want to have them there. So, for example, let's say that you saw a lot of these Standing Order 24 issues. You as a committee may decide we're feeling a bit uncomfortable about this. We want to do some work on this. You will then kind of shape that agenda yourself as well. So those will be ad hoc stuff. But I would probably say that a good 50% at least of what you will see on the agenda are regular scheduled items.
Thank you for that, Myrian.
Been mentioned that there's flexibility there. This isn't set in stone. No.
Yeah, always flexibility. The stuff that you will see regularly probably has to come to you because you are the committee that kind of deals with those issues. But beyond those, there will be flexibility to deal with the issues of the time and any other issues that you as a committee feel as if you may want to get your teeth into, I suppose.
Thank you for that clarification, Marion. I think, for the councillor, I think it was a mix and match of both of what he indicated. There are statutory deadlines by which we have to comply with. We have to sign off certain things as the Governance and Audit Committee, and then there are other issues that will come to us as a matter of course on a quarterly basis or a half-yearly basis. And just to reiterate, if there are issues like the Standing Order 24 issues that come to light or others in regards to performance or maybe the risk register or something like that, then clearly it gives us the option to call the requisite manager, director, cabinet member into the next meeting. So I think there is that flexibility. The only issue I've raised elsewhere is that we don't get overburdened by reports and actually find that we have too much stuff to deal with rather than actually given time that's necessary to deal with items. So, I think we've got that reassurance all the way around. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Any comments? You see the recommendation there that we endorse the proposed schedule for future meetings. Obviously, we're not confirming the list of people at the moment because we are not inviting anyone along. And actually, we're not indicating whether we want any additional information or research as required. But I think that's an ongoing issue as this work programme comes to us. I should imagine every meeting that we have that flexibility to adjust the work programme as we move forward. Someone prepared to move, please?
I'm happy to move that. And second.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All in favour, please show. Thank you. That's unanimous. And I think item 10 then, that's it. It says action. I think action agreed at item 10 on my agenda.
Chair, shall I pick this one up?
What that is?
Shall I pick this one again? This is point made by the member earlier about actions being taken from previous committee meetings. It's noted in point 17 of the minutes as a table. This is the first time we've done it in the table format. So we'll take on board the previous comments that have been made by the member, and we'll tidy it up so it's in a better position moving forward, so it makes more sense. And it's there for monitoring purposes. So when action is taken, officers will provide you with the assurance that the appropriate action has been taken. Either you accept that or not, and you're happy to take it off the action plan, or keep it on until you're satisfied that the agreed action has been actually implemented. But I'll work with Pam and Anne to work that through, so it's meaningful going forward, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I think that concludes. There are no other items. That concludes the meeting. So can I just thank everyone for attending, the elected members, the independent members, and most importantly, the officers for all the hard work they've undertaken in bringing these reports to us on time, in a comprehensive manner, and in a very professional manner. So can I just thank everyone for their attendance. Thank you all also for persevering with me some 2,000 miles away. So I look forward to actually seeing you all in person in September. So thank you all very much.